Hey, welcome back. You are listening to another episode of the Shaman Circle. Today we are chatting about how to start a relationship with your ancestors. My name is Allie Blair. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to start immediately by saying that this conversation is for everyone. Regardless of your family dynamic, regardless of your religious beliefs, our ancestors are simply those who have come before us and love us. It doesn't need to be weird. It doesn't need to be taboo. It is simply the concept of respecting your extended family. So let's talk about how to start your relationship with your ancestors if you don't already have one. And if you do already have one, I hope that you can still find some wisdom within this episode. Now, I don't feel like I need to share my entire life story. We have an episode dedicated to that. But I do just want to remind everybody about my personal dynamic when we talk about ancestors and lineage. If you remember when I shared in my origin story, I am half black and half white. I was adopted at birth by an entirely white family. I do not know the names, the faces of any of my black ancestors. But I do know that I have their DNA running through my veins. Now, I may not have a human connection to my birth father or to his side of the family, but when I sit in circle, when I sit in communion with my ancestors, that side of my family and that part of my lineage is absolutely present and helping to guide me through. So, no matter what your background looks like, if you've never seen your grandfather before, if you have no idea what your great-grandma looks like, that's okay. What we're talking about here transcends human relationships. We're talking about spiritual, soul relationships, right? So it's okay if your human falters in this, because ultimately we're doing some soul work today. Now, ancestral connection, ancestral healing matters for many different reasons. Again, we have a whole podcast episode where I dive into what is missing within holistic healing, the concept of ancestral healing. This connection matters for healing the whole self, for finding pride and reverence in where we've come from. And also this work matters because we are accountable to our ancestors. And I don't mean accountability like, oh, I messed up, I got to take accountability for my mistakes. But I mean that in that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We are accountable to those who have come before us. We have, if you choose to believe so, some sense of moral duty or obligation to our lineage, to our legacy, to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. You know, if you are a part of a community, if you are part of a family, if you are part of a lineage of any way, which we all are, we are accountable to a group, a collective of human beings that is bigger than ourselves. That's why this work is important. So let's dive in. The role of ancestral healing. Now we have an entire course on this, so I'm not going to dive in with all of the details in the world, but I'd like to think we're going to have a pretty decent introduction to this work today, okay? So the role of ancestors in healing has shifted and changed over the years, but our ancestors and our lineage remain present. We do not worship our ancestors like one would worship or pray to God, right? Having this relationship with your lineage can be aligned for you no matter what your religious upbringings and beliefs are. We do, again, in that ancestral healing course, we have an entire module, entire video lesson that is dedicated to sharing the intersectionality of religion and ancestral healing. Both can coexist. Your heart has the room, the capacity for both. So we don't worship our ancestors as they are not deities. Our ancestors are human beings who have gone back into soul form. Your grandma is not God. Your grandma is your grandma, right? We commune with our ancestors. We have a relationship with them. They're not some out of reach celestial being. They are real life human beings who have walked this earth and still have wisdom to share. And so when we tap into that wisdom, when we allow ourselves to tap into our lineage, to our ancestral wisdom, it gives us emotional, spiritual, and energetic support. And it gives us guidance and wisdom for everyday life. Like, my friends, life is tough. We don't need to make it harder than it needs to be by severing our connection to the wisdom of those who have come before us. Like, let's bring that wisdom in and help change the world with it. You know what I mean? Now, there are plenty of barriers to this work. Quite honestly, I don't think there should be this many barriers to this work. And I think, in part, that is why I choose to speak on this type of work. But there are so many different barriers that one can come face to face with when trying to enter this type of work, this ancestral healing. First and foremost, we can straight up feel disconnected from our ancestors. We can feel like this is bullshit. We can feel very skeptical of this work if it's not something that we're versed in or have gotten curious about in the past, right? Another common barrier that people face is cultural erasure or trauma in the family history, right? I don't want to get too deep in this because I'm sure there are a lot of different opinions that could come up, and that is okay. But the whole concept of the Catholic Church, I mean, the concept of ancestral veneration, ancestral healing, it was condemned by the church for years, generations. In some ways, it still is, which has a lot of people being misled. And a lot of people feeling like they have to sever ties with that connection because they think that both can't exist at the same time. If any of those barriers, any of those challenges, any of those doors to this work resonate with you, if you're curious about ancestral healing, please let this episode be the door for you to open up and explore that. No matter what your cultural upbringing is, no matter what your relationship to the concept of God is, no matter what your religious beliefs are, no matter what your family's beliefs are, no matter what your relationship is to your family, my friend, ancestral healing is here for you. It is your birthright to gain access to the wisdom of those who have come before you. Now, let's talk about a few ways of how to get started with creating this relationship. Now, again, we have an entire course with almost 3 hours of video lessons and content and all of the things that will quite literally show you step by step how to create an ancestor altar. And that is going to be my number one way for you to start this relationship, is to create an altar, right? To create a physical space where you can commune, where you can be in relationship with your lineage. We have an entire course that shows you how to build that altar, how to maintain, sustain that relationship once it's built, right? But that's going to be, quote unquote, your simplest way to not just create, but maintain this relationship with your ancestors, is to dedicate a physical space for them in your home, to make room for them, to make space for them. Now, with that said, you do not need any type of physical space to have a relationship with your ancestors. A great way to connect with them, whether you've started that relationship or this is your very first time trying something out, a great way to do that is to just be still. You'll hear me talk about it a lot, to be still, to sit, right? Find a quiet space, roll your shoulders back, pick up your chin, close your eyes, and get quiet. Breathe deeply. And then start to think about them, the ones that you know of, right? Maybe you think about a grandfather or a friend who had passed or a doggy that you had when you were a kid, right? Start thinking about those that were human, that have gone on, that have passed. Those are your ancestors. You can visualize them, imagine them, imagine having a conversation with them. Right? Can you use your imagination to see yourself at a table in the park with them, or at your kitchen table, or in the middle of an open field? And can you imagine your grandfather, your mom, whoever it is, walking up to you? Right? If you can use your imagination and your intuition, you can make a lot of magic happen, my friends. You don't need any sort of physical space, any sort of altar to start and maintain this relationship. Would I love to see you build a dedicated space for you to sit with your people? Yes. Is it necessary for you to have this relationship? No. So even if you have no space of your own, my friends, the space inside your mind is yours. Use your imagination, use your intuition, and use your intention. You can make a lot of beautiful things happen. The quieter you get in your mind, And the more you practice, the stronger that connection will become. Now, as we continue to build this relationship with our lineage, with our ancestors, with those who have come before us, I want to emphasize the concept of being consistent over being perfect. You'll probably hear me say this a few times in various different episodes. I would love to see you consistently say good morning, say thank you each day. That is effective. If you do that once a day, you spend 3 minutes intentionally thinking about your people. That's beautiful. That's perfect. And that's more than enough. It doesn't have to be a huge ceremony every single day, although it absolutely can be. But I want to see you be consistent with your practice, with any practice, right? Meditation, therapy, yoga, what have you. This included. I want to see you be consistent with showing up for your people. But it doesn't have to be a huge thing that you have to go out of your way for a 5-hour thing every morning, right? Now, again, we won't go too into detail here because we have an entire 13-lesson course that guides you through all of this. But as you build that relationship and as you want to start maintaining it, we have different rituals we can do, different offerings. Leaving a glass of warm water on your ancestor altar is a beautiful offering. We can say different prayers. We can ask for guidance, right? So there are many different ways that we can continue to build and maintain that relationship. Bottom line, how would you build a relationship with a good friend? How would you build a relationship with someone that you want to be your mentor? Treat this relationship with your ancestors like that, and you will build something beautiful. Now, I want to start to close us out here because, again, we have 3 hours of lessons on this very concept. But as we start to close out here, I want to just lovingly, gently remind you to take this work one step at a time. You have an entire lifetime to figure out your relationship and your dynamic with your lineage, with your ancestry, and with your legacy. If you do want to dive deeper, you want to learn how to create that ancestor altar, you want to talk more about how God and ancestors can coexist, you want to learn more how to maintain and sustain that relationship, we have a whole course dedicated to that. It's called Rooted, Building Your Ancestor Altar, all about ancestral healing. But I do hope that this quick rundown of how to start that relationship with your lineage, I do hope that you found some wisdom, some guidance, some encouragement, maybe an opportunity for you to start to build that relationship through this episode. And the last thing I want to leave you with, my friends, remember, there is no wrong way to connect to your lineage. Get curious, try different things, see what feels good, see what doesn't. As long as you are working from a place of integrity and you are moving with pure intentions, you can do no wrong. So let yourself explore, let yourself get curious and see what comes up for you. Go be brave and seek who is also seeking you. All right, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in. You know where to find me. In the meantime, Instagram, email, website. Thank you for being here, not just in our podcast realm, but generally in the world. Thank you for being here. The world needs your light, and I feel very grateful to share Mother Earth with you. All right, my friends, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the other side. Have a good one.